The road to the canal cut straight through farmland, the asphalt buckling in places from years of heat. Daniel Mercer drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting against the open window, his arm drinking in the humid air. Palmettos swayed under a merciless Florida sun, and every so often, a white egret would flap lazily over the ditch beside the road. It didn't feel dangerous here. Not yet. The GPS told him to turn down a gravel track where a handmade sign read, Alvarez Outfitters, Kayak Rentals, and Local Tours. The paint was fading, but the letters were neat, proud. Daniel parked and stepped out, stretching after the drive from Miami. A squat wooden shack stood at the water's edge, with a dock that extended into a narrow canal. A man sat on the porch in a rocking chair, broad-shouldered and weathered, with a straw hat pulled low over his brow. "Morning," the man called, rocking slowly. His voice carried the relaxed cadence of someone who had spent his life on the water. "Morning," Daniel answered. "You must be Alvarez?" The man grinned and stood, his handshake firm and deliberate. "Luis Alvarez. Call me Luis. You're the fellow who booked online, right?" "Daniel Mercer, from up north." "That's me. First time in the Everglades." "Luis Chaquil. Well, technically this here's more farmland canal than true swamp. But don't let that fool you. Life don't care what you call it. It still bites if you're careless." Daniel gave a polite smile. "I've done some kayaking back home. Figured it'd be peaceful. Good way to see the real Florida." Luis's eyes softened at that. He studied Daniel with the quiet patience of a man measuring more than words. Finally, he nodded. "It could be peaceful, but you treat this place with respect. You hear? Calm on top, dangerous underneath. Always remember that." Daniel felt a small prickle of unease, but nodded quickly. "I'll remember." Luis led him to the dock, where a row of brightly colored kayaks floated against the pilings. He handed Daniel a paddle and a slim life vest. No shame in wearing it. Current slow, but if you go under with the wrong weight on you, you might not come back up. Daniel slipped it on, adjusting the straps. "Thanks for the advice." Luis tightened the last strap with a practiced tug, his tone softening. "I don't mean to scare you. I've taken folks out here 30 years. Most of them never seen more than a gator tail and a few herons. But things live out here that don't show up on brochures. You keep sharp." The words settled heavier than Daniel expected. Still, when he slid into the kayak and pushed off the dock, the water lapping softly against the hull, excitement bubbled in his chest. The canal stretched ahead like a vein of glass, flanked by sawgrass and mangroves that leaned toward one another until they arched overhead, weaving a living tunnel. Daniel dipped the paddle slowly, savoring the rhythm. Birds scattered from the brush, ibis, herons, even a flash of roseate spoonbill, and their cries echoed strangely in the enclosed space. The sun struck the water like molten steel, but the shade beneath the mangroves felt cooler. He let the kayak drift, closing his eyes briefly. This was why he came to Florida, to get away from deadlines and office windows, to feel something primal again. A sudden ripple snapped his eyes open. Not the lazy rings of a turtle surfacing, but a sharp V-shaped wake that darted across the water, then vanished. Daniel's paddle froze mid-stroke. He scanned the surface. Nothing, just still water, smooth as glass. "You're jumpy already," he muttered, forcing a laugh. Could have been a fish. But the unease didn't fade. Half an hour later, he heard the drone of an engine. An airboat swept into view, sunlight flashing off its vanguard. A young woman stood at the helm, hair whipping in the wind. She steered skillfully, slowing as she noticed him. "Hey there," she called over the motor, cupping her hand around her mouth. "Everything good?" Daniel shaded his eyes. "Yeah, just taking it easy." The woman guided the airboat closer, cutting the engine so it drifted. Her t-shirt bore the logo of a wildlife rescue group. "You renting from Alvarez?" she asked. "That's right. Good man. He knows these waters better than anyone." She glanced toward the shaded banks, her expression tightening. "You're heading into python country, you know. They like to bask along the mangroves this time of day. Big ones." Daniel laughed lightly, though the sound came out thinner than he meant. "I'll keep an eye out. Didn't think I'd actually see one." You might. Most folks don't realize how far they've spread. She smiled then, though it carried a trace of seriousness. Be careful out here, and if you tip over, keep calm. Panic's worse than anything in these waters. With that, she revved the engine and waved. The roar filled the canal as the airboat powered off, leaving ripples that rocked his kayak. Her voice echoed in his head as the silence returned. They liked to bask along the mangroves. The farther Daniel paddled, the narrower the canal grew. The trees arched so close their branches tangled overhead, dimming the light. His paddle dipped, pulled, lifted, the sound rhythmic, almost hypnotic. But every time the kayak slid past a cluster of roots, he imagined something stirring beneath them. The air was heavy here, damp with the smell of brackish water and rotting vegetation. Insects whined in his ears. His shirt clung to his skin with sweat. He paused to drink from his water bottle, letting the kayak drift. The silence pressed in. No birds now, no rustle of leaves. Just the faint creak of the kayak shifting beneath him. A soft splash broke the quiet. He whipped his head toward the sound. A swirl spread near the bank, as though something heavy had slipped into the canal. Daniel's pulse kicked. He tightened his grip on the paddle, scanning the shadowy waterline. Nothing. You're letting stories get in your head, he whispered. Yet his voice sounded small, out of place in the hush. He forced himself to paddle again, strokes deliberate, shoulders tense. At a bend in the canal, the mangroves closed in until the waterway felt no wider than a living hallway. Branches scraped the kayak's hull as he pushed through. Ahead, a log floated across the surface, blocking part of the channel. Except it wasn't a log. The shape glistened faintly, dark scales catching the light before vanishing as the body slid deeper into the water. Daniel froze, the paddle poised mid-air. His breath stuck in his throat. He stared at the ripples spreading where the creature had disappeared, the water settling too quickly. Something had been watching, and it was gone now, gone beneath him. The air in the canal thickened as Daniel pressed forward, the kayak scraping softly against tangled roots. Each paddle stroke felt harder, the water heavier. Sweat dripped down his temple, stinging his eyes. He told himself it was just the heat, just the claustrophobic press of mangroves. But the silence was wrong, too complete. The swamp was supposed to buzz with life, frogs, crickets, birds, but it felt as though everything had fled. Then the water moved. At first it was just a bulge, as if a submerged log shifted beneath the surface. Daniel slowed, squinting, paddle raised. The bulge rose, split, and in a terrifying instant, the canal erupted. A python the size of a tree trunk launched from the bank, scales flashing bronze and black. Its body slammed across the kayak, so heavy the hull rocked wildly. Daniel cried out, the paddle slipping from his hand. Jesus Christ. The boat tilted too far. He grabbed at the rim, but the snake's momentum was unstoppable. The kayak capsized, tossing him into the water with a cold splash. Dark, choking silence swallowed him. His lungs seized as murky water rushed into his nose and mouth. He kicked hard, panic clawing at his chest, until his head broke the surface. Slap, whip, splash. The python was half on the overturned kayak, half in the canal, writhing in violent arcs. Its tail lashed the surface, spraying water into Daniel's face. Oh God, oh God, oh God, he gasped, fighting to stay upright. Something brushed his leg underwater. A thick, muscular coil sliding against his skin. No! He kicked wildly, thrashing in the murk. The coil slipped away, for now. The kayak bobbed just feet from him, upside down. Daniel lunged for it, desperate for something solid. His fingers slapped against slick plastic, clung to the rim. The snake surged, shoving its bulk further across the hull, as if trying to pin him beneath it. He hauled himself half onto the overturned kayak, chest heaving. But the python whipped its body toward him with a terrifying speed. Its head lunged, jaws wide. Daniel screamed, shoving a forearm between them. The teeth scraped against his sleeve, pressure shocking through his bones. He ripped free, rolling off the kayak back into the water. The paddle floated several feet away, spinning lazily. He lunged for it, splashing desperately, but the snake cut between them like a torpedo. Its massive head lifted, tongue flickering, eyes unblinking. "Stay back," Daniel shouted, though the command was useless. His voice cracked in fear. The python lunged again. He went under, dragged by the rush of its body. The world dissolved into brown water, bubbles erupting from his mouth. He flailed, striking blindly at the smooth, iron-hard muscle that wrapped around his torso. Pressure, crushing pressure around his ribs, squeezing like a vice. His chest convulsed, desperate for air. He clawed at the coils, but they only tightened, each second drawing him closer to blackness. Daniel's vision filled with stars. His thoughts fractured. This is it. This is how I die. But instinct fought back. His mouth found the python's side, teeth sinking desperately into scale and flesh. Bitter, metallic blood filled his mouth. The snake jerked, loosening slightly in shock. Daniel wrenched free, kicking upward with everything he had left. His head burst above water, a ragged scream tearing out of him. He coughed, vomited swamp water, clawed for breath. The coils still clung, though looser now, wrapping across his chest and waist. He staggered toward the muddy bank, dragging both himself and the snake with him. His knees sank in a muck as he collapsed onto the shallows, coughing and retching. But the ground offered no salvation. The python surged up with him, its coils tightening again, forcing him flat onto the mud. "Somebody, help!" His scream tore the silence, raw and desperate. The swamp didn't answer. The only sound was the slow hiss of scales against mud as the python adjusted its grip. Its weight crushed down, ribs groaning beneath the pressure. Daniel's hands clawed forward, fingers brushing the edge of the kayak where a small safety kit dangled in a net pocket. Inside, he glimpsed the stubby handle of a knife. Yes, come on. He reached, stretching until his shoulder screamed. His fingertips touched it, then shoved too hard. The knife slipped free, falling into the mud just out of reach. "No!" His voice cracked. He kicked, writhing, trying to drag himself closer, but every movement cost oxygen. Black spots bloomed at the edge of his vision. The python shifted, its head hovering above him now. Its jaws opened slightly, tongue flickering inches from his cheek, tasting his fear. Daniel whimpered, "Not like this, please, not like this." From the canal, an alligator's eyes broke the surface, watching silently. Daniel saw them over the python's shoulder, two dull, reptilian witnesses to his struggle. The swamp was indifferent. One predator crushing another, and him caught between. His chest convulsed, air squeezed thin. Stars filled his vision. He slammed a fist against the snake's head, but it didn't flinch. "Somebody." His voice broke into a sob. "Anybody." The silence pressed heavier than the coils themselves. The knife gleamed faintly in the mud, just beyond his grasp. If he could roll just a few inches. He twisted, ribs screaming. His fingernails scraped the handle, dragging it closer. The python sensed the movement, tightening once more, forcing a strangled cry from his throat. Daniel's fingers locked around the knife at last. He wrenched it free, hand trembling, and raised it high. But before he could strike, the python's body whipped violently, dragging him sideways back into the canal. The knife flew from his grip, lost in the water. "No! God damn it!" He screamed. The words drowned as his head went under again. The coils tightened further, the crushing rhythm methodical. His vision blurred, lungs burning, chest convulsing in agony. This time, he wasn't sure he could surface again. Daniel's world had shrunk to three sensations: the burning in his chest, the crushing around his ribs, and the deafening pound of his own heart. The python dragged him deeper, its coils grinding like stone on bone. Mud and silt clouded the water as his body thrashed helplessly against its grip. "This is it. You're done. It's stronger, faster, everything you're not." The thought cut through the chaos with a cold finality. His arms flailed, weak against the muscular loops that tightened inexorably. The knife was gone. The kayak was gone. His lungs screamed for air, desperate, clawing for oxygen that wasn't there. Somewhere in the darkness, Luis's words echoed. Calm on top, dangerous underneath. Daniel's chest convulsed. He could almost feel his ribs flexing inward, threatening to snap. No, not yet. With a surge of animal will, he jammed his thumb hard into the snake's eye. The reaction was immediate, a violent thrash that ripped him upward. His head broke the surface with a roar, coughing and gasping, choking on swamp water and his own ragged breath. "Help! Somebody! Help me!" he screamed into the empty mangroves. His voice cracked, drowned out by the chaotic splash of the python's body. The canal didn't answer. No voices, no engines, no sign of another human being. Only the insect hum and the steady hiss of scales tightening again. He stumbled toward the muddy bank, half swimming, half dragged by the snake. Each step in the shallows felt like walking into quicksand. His knees buckled as the coils constricted again, forcing him flat into the muck. "God damn it, get off me," he bellowed, smashing a fist into the python's side. The impact was useless, like striking wet stone. The snake's head hovered inches from his face, tongue flickering, tasting the panic rolling off his skin. Daniel turned his head away, breath coming in short, ragged bursts. His chest felt like it might cave in with every contraction of its muscles. "Please," he rasped, voice trembling. I'm not food. Let me go." The python, indifferent, shifted its coils higher, wrapping around his shoulders now. The pressure on his chest grew unbearable. He couldn't draw a full breath anymore. Each inhale was a gasp, each exhale a whimper. Blackness tugged at the edges of his vision. No, not like this. Not on a muddy bank in the middle of nowhere. Desperation sharpened him. His eyes darted around the ground. The overturned kayak bobbed against the bank, bumping softly with the current. Something glinted in the mud near its net pocket, plastic orange, the safety whistle from the rental kit. Not a weapon, but maybe a distraction. He clawed through the muck with trembling fingers, stretching as the python squeezed tighter. His chest heaved, vision dimming, but he managed to close his hand around the whistle. He jammed it into his mouth and blew as hard as his crushed lungs would allow. The shrill, piercing note sliced through the swamp. The python thrashed violently, either startled by the sound or by his sudden movement. Daniel blew again, high and desperate, forcing every ounce of air into the shriek. His ears rang, his throat burned. The coils loosened just slightly, but enough. He twisted, rolling his body, forcing space between his ribs and the crushing loops. Gasping, he shoved mud into the snake's face with both hands. The python recoiled, striking blind in anger, its head whipping past his ear, so close he felt the rush of displaced air. "Not today," Daniel shouted, though it came out as more of a croak. He stumbled upright, staggering toward the kayak. His legs shook, barely obeying him. The python followed, gliding low across the mud, its body rippling in powerful waves. Daniel scrambled onto the kayak, slick with slime, nearly slipping back in. He reached desperately for the safety rope tied to the bow. His chest rose and fell in painful jerks, air only half filling his lungs. The python lunged again, its jaws snapping shut on empty space as he rolled sideways. Its body slammed the kayak, rocking it hard. Daniel's hip struck the plastic hull, a sharp flare of pain, but he held on. "Stay back," he shouted hoarsely, though he knew shouting did nothing. The snake hissed, body coiling again, preparing to strike. "Think, Daniel. Think." He scanned the water. The paddle was gone. The knife was gone. But there, just at the edge of the kayak, something red bobbed in the shallows. The flare canister from the safety kit. Adrenaline surged. He dove off the kayak, plunging into the waist-deep water. His fingers closed around the plastic tube, just as the python's tail whipped toward him. The impact slammed into his side, spinning him into the mud. Groaning, he dragged himself upright, flare in hand. He fumbled with the cap, slick fingers slipping on the ridges. The python advanced, body rising higher off the ground now, jaws opening in slow, deliberate menace. Its tongue flicked, tasting him again. Daniel twisted the cap free with a final, desperate wrench. Sparks hissed, then the flare ignited with a furious red glow, spitting smoke and fire. The python lunged. Daniel jammed the burning flare toward its face. The beast recoiled instantly, thrashing so violently the water exploded around them. Its head struck the kayak, tipping it again, before it whipped away with a hiss that sounded almost like rage. Daniel stumbled backward, holding the flare out like a sword. His chest heaved, lungs screaming, ribs aching, but he kept his grip tight. Back! You hear me? Stay the hell back. For a moment, impossibly, it worked. The python retreated into the water, its body sliding silently beneath the surface. The ripples spread outward, then stilled. Daniel stood there, shivering, clutching the flare. The acrid smoke burned his throat, mixed with the copper tang of blood in his mouth. Every muscle shook with exhaustion. The silence returned, too complete. He waited, listening, eyes darting over the still water. Then, from below, a bubble rose. Another. A dark shape shifted beneath the surface, circling slowly. The python wasn't gone. It was waiting. Daniel's knees buckled, the weight of the realization pressing harder than the coils ever had. He dropped onto the kayak's overturned hull, clutching the flare close, tears stinging his eyes. "I can't do this," he whispered, voice breaking. "I can't fight this thing." But the swamp, indifferent as ever, gave no answer. Only the faint ripple of something massive moving beneath him, patient as death itself. Daniel sprawled across the overturned kayak, the red flare hissing and sputtering in his trembling hand. The acrid smoke burned his throat, but he held it out like a talisman, eyes sweeping the dark water. The canal was quiet again, too quiet. No splash, no hiss, no warning. Only silence, heavy and oppressive. The python had vanished beneath the surface, but Daniel knew it was there, circling, waiting. His ribs ached from the constriction, every breath shallow and ragged. A hot pain radiated across his chest, as if his body had been cinched in steel bands. His forearms burned with scratches itchy. The teeth had scraped him. The muck of the swamp clung to his clothes and skin like glue. "Okay," he whispered to himself, voice shaking. "Okay, one step at a time. Just get to the bank." He shoved off the kayak and staggered through waist-deep water toward the muddy edge. The flare smoked and hissed, casting an angry red glow on the mangroves that leaned over him like watching figures. His shoes sank into the muck with each step, sucking him down, but he pressed forward until his knees hit the bank. He clawed onto it, pulling himself up until his chest lay across the mud. Air. He sucked it down in desperate gulps, mud grinding into his cheek. But before he could catch a full breath, something slammed into his legs. The python. It surged from the water, coils wrapping his thighs and dragging him backward. Daniel screamed, scrambling for roots that jutted from the bank. His fingers closed around one, slick and gnarled, as the snake pulled hard, stretching his body taut between the swamp and safety. "No, not again." His voice cracked into a raw shout. The flare hissed in his hand, smoke pouring. He swung it wildly, smashing the burning tip into the snake's body. The beast recoiled at the heat, but did not release him. Its coils slid higher, wrapping his waist now, the familiar crushing pressure beginning anew. Daniel slammed the flare into its hide again and again, sparks bouncing off wet scales. The python hissed, an ugly, low sound that vibrated in his bones, but it only tightened its grip. The flare sputtered, sparks dying. "No, no, no. Stay with me." Daniel shook it desperately, but the glow dimmed, then went out, leaving only a curling thread of smoke. The last of his weapon fizzled in the mud. He was plunged into darkness, the canopy overhead swallowing the late afternoon sun. The only light came in fractured slivers through the mangrove branches, and the python tightened. The coils crushed his waist, his ribs, every squeeze timed with his weakening breaths. Daniel gagged, a strangled sound tearing from his throat. His hands clawed at the mud, pulling him inches forward, but the snake dragged him back just as easily. "Please," he croaked, tears cutting streaks in the grime on his face. "Please, God, not like this." His vision blurred. Spots of light danced at the corners of his eyes. His fingers clawed towards something glinting just beyond reach. His kayak's safety knife, half buried in the mud where he'd lost it before. If he could just reach it. Daniel stretched, arms shaking violently, fingers grazing the mud-slick handle. The python's head loomed above him, tongue flickering across his cheek, tasting his fear. "Not done yet," he rasped. With a guttural cry, he wrenched his arm forward, fingertips locking around the knife. He ripped it from the mud and swung clumsily, slashing at the coils across his chest. The blade scraped scales, shallow at first, then deeper. The python recoiled, twisting, its body convulsing in violent ripples. The pressure loosened for a heartbeat. Daniel drove the blade down again, screaming with effort, this time feeling the blade sink into muscle. The snake thrashed, whipping its body across him. The force slammed him into the mud, knocking the knife from his hand. It landed just out of reach again. "And oh," he roared, voice breaking. Water surged around them as the python tried to drag him fully back into the canal. Daniel clutched at the roots, nails breaking, skin peeling, but he refused to let go. His chest heaved in shallow gasps, pain roaring with each attempt at breath. Somewhere in the darkness, eyes glowed low in the water. An alligator drifting silently, drawn to the chaos. Its ridged back cut through the surface, watching. "Great," Daniel rasped bitterly, tears stinging his eyes. "Dinner and a show." He pressed his forehead into the mud, lungs spasming, praying the roots would hold. The python pulled again, harder. His grip slipped inches, mud tearing beneath his fingernails. His arms burned. He couldn't hold much longer. "Somebody!" His scream cracked the stillness, desperate and hoarse. "Somebody please." But no one came. The snake's head dipped, jaws snapping inches from his face. He shoved it away, but the coils only cinched tighter. His vision tunneled. His lungs felt like collapsing balloons. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" He chanted through gasps, forcing the words out as if they alone could keep him alive. The knife glinted again. Inches away, summoning the last of his strength, Daniel lunged sideways, sacrificing his grip on the roots. The motion dragged him closer to the snake's coils, but his fingers closed on the knife once more. With a wild cry, he drove it upward into the python's side, blade sinking deep this time. Blood welled dark and slick across his arm. The python writhed, a violent convulsion that lifted Daniel off the ground before slamming him back down. The air left his lungs in a ragged groan, but the coils loosened, finally, truly loosened. He stabbed again and again, screaming with each thrust. The snake recoiled, coils falling away in frantic, rolling thrashes. Daniel tore himself free, crawling through the mud, clutching his bruised ribs with one hand, knife with the other. His chest rose and fell in ragged sobs. The python slid back into the water, body rippling beneath the surface, disappearing as quickly as it had struck. For a long time, Daniel lay on the bank, coughing and shaking, every breath jagged. Mud and blood streaked his body, sweat burning his eyes. When at last he could sit upright, he spoke aloud, voice cracked and broken. "You're not taking me. Not today." The swamp gave no reply. Only the distant croak of a bullfrog returned, as though life had decided it was safe to resume. But Daniel knew better. The python was still out there. Wounded maybe, angry definitely, and he was still alone. The swamp smelled of iron and rot. Daniel sat hunched on the muddy bank, ribs aching with every shallow breath, his shirt clinging wet to his body. His knife, smeared dark with blood, rested in his lap. He gripped it not because it felt like a weapon, but because it was the only thing that tethered him to the idea of survival. His mind drifted between flashes of the python's coils and the dizzy haze of oxygen-deprived lungs. He could still feel the phantom squeeze around his chest, his ribs threatening to crack. The bullfrog croaked again, somewhere out there, calm and oblivious. The world had gone back to normal, but not for him. He coughed, a wet, ragged sound, and spat mud into the roots. "You're still out there," he muttered, voice hoarse. "I know you are." A rustle broke the silence. Not the heavy, wet slide of scales, lighter, more deliberate. Footsteps. Daniel froze, tightening his grip on the knife. "Hello." A woman's voice carried through the trees, steady but cautious. "Anyone out here?" His head jerked toward the sound. At first he thought he was hallucinating, but then he saw her, a tall figure pushing through the mangroves, a flashlight beam cutting the green. She wore a canvas hat and carried a long hunting rifle slung over her shoulder. A machete gleamed at her hip. Daniel blinked. "Ush, E." His voice cracked with exhaustion. "Here, I'm here." The figure raised her light, and when it fell across his mud-caked face, she quickened her pace. "Oh my God," she said, rushing to kneel beside him. Her accent carried that unmistakable Florida drawl. She smelled faintly of sweat and swamp water, but there was no hesitation in her movements. She immediately started checking his arms and chest with practiced hands. "You're half dead, stranger. What the hell happened to you?" Daniel let out a broken laugh that dissolved into a cough. "Snake, big one, pulled me under twice." Her hands paused on his ribcage. Her eyes narrowed. "Python." He nodded weakly. "Burmese." Hemi-wrapped thought I was done. She sat back on her heels, studying him with an intensity that was more than concern. It was familiarity. She'd heard this before, maybe even seen it. "You're lucky you're breathing at all. Those things don't let go." "I made it let go," Daniel muttered, gesturing to the knife in his lap. "Barely." The woman looked at the blade, then at the dark smears on his arms, the bruises rising purple across his ribs. She gave a small, grim nod. "Name's Maya," she said. "Local guide. I hunt these monsters." Daniel blinked at her. "You hunt them?" "Yeah. Volunteer program. Python challenge, contracts, bounty work. I've seen him take deer, gators, even dogs out of backyards. But a tourist?" She gave him a hard look. "You weren't exactly sticking to the safe trails, were you?" Daniel almost laughed again, but the pain in his chest cut him off. "I was kayaking. Just wanted a quiet paddle. No signs, no warnings." Then it lunged onto my boat. Maya shook her head. "They don't usually attack like that unless they're starving. Or real damn big." She glanced toward the canal, where the water lapped innocently at the mud. "How long ago?" "Minutes. It's still out there. Wounded." Her jaw tightened. She unslung the rifle in one fluid motion, checking the chamber. "And it's not done. A wounded python's more dangerous than a fresh one." Daniel shivered at her matter-of-fact tone. "You don't understand. It wanted me. It could have let go when I stabbed it, but it kept coming. Like it wasn't just hunger. Like it wanted to crush me." Maya gave him a look that was both pity and resolve. "That's what they do, Daniel. It's what they're made for." The use of his name startled him. "Ow!" She lifted a small plastic card from a mud, still clipped to his life vest. "Found your rental ID. You're lucky I heard you yelling. Not many people come out here this late." Daniel tried to sit straighter, groaning as pain shot through his chest. "So what now? Do we leave?" Maya's eyes stayed on the water. "We should, but it won't leave you alone. Not tonight. You heard it. Mark yourself. Sometimes these things fixate." He stared at her, horrified. "You're saying it's hunting me. I'm saying it won't stop easy. And if you want to live, you'd better listen to me." She stood, offering him a hand. "Can you walk?" He took it, staggering to his feet. His legs shook violently, but Maya steadied him with surprising strength. Slow breaths. "Don't waste energy," she instructed. "We'll cut across the trail back to my truck." But we moved quiet. They started into the trees, her flashlight sweeping ahead, his knife still clutched white-knuckled in his hand. The swamp buzzed with cicadas, but beneath the din, Daniel swore he could hear something heavier moving. "You're really not scared, are you?" he asked, voice low. "Scared keeps me alive," Maya replied. "But I respect this place." "That's different. Fear without respect gets you killed." They walked in silence for a stretch. Daniel's chest screamed with each step, but he kept moving, guided by her pace. Then a branch snapped behind them. Both froze. Maya's flashlight flicked off. Darkness swallowed them whole. "Don't move," she whispered. Daniel's lungs tightened again, though this time from panic. He strained his ears. There was the sound of water parting, slow and deliberate. Maya slid the rifle to her shoulder, her breath steady. calm as stone. It followed, she murmured. Damn thing's tracking you. Daniel's voice was a rasp. Shoot it. Not yet. I don't see it. A ripple of water glistened in the faint moonlight through the canopy. Then another. The python was closer, its bulk moving with terrifying patience. Daniel's hand trembled on his knife. It's right there. Not close enough, Maya whispered. If I miss, we're done. Let it come in range. He turned to her, incredulous. Range? It's not a deer, it's... Shoo, she snapped, eyes locked forward. The waterline broke. A massive head rose from the shallows, glistening, its body coiling behind like a living river. The python lifted higher, tasting the air, tongue darting. Daniel stumbled back, heart hammering in his throat. Jesus Christ. Hold steady, Maya said, voice low but sharp. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The python slid forward, gliding between mangrove roots, eyes fixed on them both. Closer, she breathed. Just a little closer. Daniel's every instinct screamed to run, but he couldn't. His legs wouldn't move. He stood frozen, chest burning, eyes locked on the serpent's advance. Then, bang. The rifle cracked like thunder, shattering the swamp's stillness. A flash of light lit the trees. The python's head jerked, water exploding around it. Go! Maya barked, chambering another round. Daniel lurched forward, half running, half stumbling, as the beast thrashed in the water, its massive body crashing against the roots. Maya fired again. Another crack. Another spray of water. Daniel didn't dare look back. He just ran, clutching his ribs, knife slick in his grip. Behind him, Maya's voice cut through the chaos. Don't stop. Get to the trail. The rifle's echo still rang through the mangroves when Daniel burst onto the narrow hunting trail. His breath came in jagged gasps, each step stabbing his ribs. Behind him, the water churned with violent splashes, the python's body lashing like a storm. Maya crashed through the brush a second later, rifle in hand, face set in grim determination. She scanned the canal as they moved. Keep running, she barked. Don't think. Just move. Daniel staggered forward, mud sucking at his shoes. Did you hit it? Twice, Maya said flatly, her eyes never leaving the water's edge. But that's not enough. Skull on those things is thick and body shots just piss him off. Piss it off. Daniel's voice cracked. It was already trying to crush me to death. Then you know what we're up against. The trail twisted deeper into the swamp, trees closing overhead. The light was fading fast, darkness swallowing the narrow path. Maya flicked her flashlight back on, the beams slicing through the shadows. Truck's about 1.5 miles east, she said, voice low and calm, as if reciting a plan to herself as much as to him. We keep a steady pace. No running blind. That thing moves quiet when it wants to. Daniel tried to steady his breathing, though every inhale sent fire across his chest. He clutched his side. I don't think I can make 1.5 miles. You don't have a choice, Maya said. Pain means you're alive. Keep it that way. He wanted to argue, to collapse right there in the mud, but something in her tone, sharp, unyielding, kept him moving. For a few minutes, the swamp seemed to relent. Only cicadas and the occasional bird cry filled the night air. The silence that followed gunfire was almost worse than the chaos. Then a sound broke it, a low, rolling splash in the distance. Daniel froze. It's following us. Maya raised the rifle, scanning the brush. Of course it is. It knows this land better than we do. It's wounded, hungry, and locked onto you. Daniel's stomach twisted. Me? Why me? Maya's flashlight beam cut across his battered chest, where the mud and blood streaks still glistened. She shook her head. You smell like prey now. That thing's keyed in on you. He swallowed hard, fighting the bile that rose in his throat. They pressed on, the trail narrowing as mangrove roots clawed across it. Maya hacked through a few with her machete, each swing practiced and precise. Stay close, she said. Don't wander. These canals branch everywhere. One wrong turn and we'll be lost. Daniel managed a bitter laugh. Pretty sure I'm already lost. You've got me now. That helps. For a moment, her voice softened, and Daniel caught a glimpse of something beneath her hardened shell, a steadiness built on years of surviving this land. "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly, voice strained but genuine. "Why hunt them?" Maya kept walking, eyes sharp on the trail ahead. "Because nobody else will. They're not supposed to be here. Apex killers in the wrong ecosystem. They eat everything. Rabbits, raccoons, gators, deer. You name it, I've seen one in their gut." "And people?" Daniel asked, the word hanging like a weight between them. She hesitated before answering. "Not often, but happens. Thing is, when it does, nobody wants to talk about it. Bad for tourism, bad for business. So folks like me, we deal with it in the dark." Daniel shivered. "So I'm just a line in a story no one would ever tell." Her jaw tightened. "Not if I get you out of here." The trail bent toward another narrow canal. The moonlight caught the surface, pale and still. Daniel slowed, dread crawling up his spine. "Wait," he whispered. "I don't like this." Maya held up a hand, crouching at the edge. She scanned the water carefully, her beam darting across lily pads and rippling reeds. "Neither do I." Then, without warning, the water erupted. A massive coil slapped across the bank, striking so close Daniel felt the spray. He stumbled backward, screaming. Maya fired. The rifle cracked, and the shot echoed through the trees. The python recoiled, thrashing, its body twisting in violent arcs. "Move!" Maya shouted, grabbing Daniel by the arm and shoving him down the trail. They sprinted, branches slapping their faces, mud pulling at their feet. Behind them, the python crashed through the reeds, its pursuit no longer silent but deafening, a wall of muscle tearing through the swamp. Daniel's legs burned, his lungs shrieked, but adrenaline carried him. "It's not stopping," he gasped. "It won't until one of us is dead." Maya snapped. They broke into a small clearing where the trail forked. Maya skidded to a halt, scanning both directions. "Which way?" Daniel panted, panic high in his voice. "You should take us out," she cut off, head snapping toward the left fork. The sound of sloshing water thundered closer. "No time. This way." They bolted right. The ground here was uneven, riddled with roots and shallow pools. Daniel tripped, crashing to his knees. Pain exploded in his chest. "Get up," Maya hissed, hauling him by the arm. "You can't stop. I can't breathe." "Yes, you can." Her voice was fire. "You don't get to quit. Not here." Her words slammed into him like a second wind. He staggered up, forcing his legs to obey. Suddenly, the trail narrowed to a boardwalk, rotted with stretching over a deeper canal. Maya cursed under her breath. "Bridge is half gone. Stay on the center planks. Don't fall." They started across, the wood creaking under their weight. Daniel's heart pounded with each step. The water below was black, bottomless, rippling with faint movement. Halfway across, a massive coil surged upward, smashing against the boards. The bridge shuddered, splinters flying. Daniel screamed, stumbling sideways. Maya caught his arm. "Stay with me." She fired down into the water. The python thrashed, hammering the boards again. One plank snapped. Daniel's foot plunged through, nearly dragging him in. He yanked it free, gasping. "Run!" Maya barked, pulling him toward the far side. They sprinted as the boards buckled behind them, each impact from the serpent shaking the walkway apart. At last they leapt on a solid ground, tumbling into the mud as the boardwalk collapsed into the canal with a deafening crash. Daniel rolled onto his back, chest heaving, staring at the broken wood floating on the water. "It won't stop. Jesus Christ, it won't stop." Maya crouched beside him, reloading with calm efficiency. Her hands didn't shake, though her eyes burned with intensity. "Then neither do we." She looked at him, steady and unflinching. "You hear me, Daniel? We fight until we're out of this swamp, or until it's dead." Daniel met her gaze, his voice breaking but resolute. "Then let's kill the bastard." The swamp was quiet, almost oppressively so, as Daniel and Maya crouched behind a thicket of mangroves. Sweat ran in rivulets down his mud-streaked face, and his ribs screamed with every shallow breath. The last of the daylight had disappeared, replaced by a murky, oppressive darkness broken only by Maya's flashlight beam. "Think it's still following us?" Daniel whispered, his voice hoarse. Maya didn't answer at first, eyes scanning the canal's edge with the meticulous caution of someone who had spent decades reading these waters. Finally, she shook her head. "I don't know. Could be circling, waiting. That's what pythons do. They test, probe, and wait for their prey to weaken." Daniel shivered, clutching his knife like a lifeline. "I feel weak already. I can't keep running forever." "Good," Maya said sharply, finally meeting his gaze. "Then it's time we stopped running." Daniel's eyes widened. "Stop what?" "We fight," she said simply. "This isn't a deer we can chase into a net or a trap. This is a massive, intelligent predator, and right now it's got the upper hand. But we can level the field if we do it smart." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. We don't have any weapons. We got a knife and a rifle. That's it." Maya's eyes flashed. "And those are enough if we set the trap right. You got stamina. You're scared. That counts for something. Fear keeps you alive and focused." He swallowed, chest burning. "What kind of trap?" She crouched lower, pointing to a narrow section of canal just ahead. "This area is perfect. The banks are shallow, the roots narrow the waterway. We can funnel it. I'll distract it, get to coil into the channel, and you hit it where it counts." Daniel's stomach twisted. "Distract it, you? You're putting yourself in front of that thing." Maya smirked faintly, a grim humor in her eyes. "I've done it before. If it weren't for me, you'd be dead already. Consider this payback." He stared at her, terror and admiration battling inside him. I don't know if I can watch." "You won't have a choice," she said, voice firm. "I'll keep it busy. You wait for the signal, and then you strike." "Clear." Daniel nodded, jaw tight. "Clear." They crept through the underbrush, mud sucking at their boots, each step deliberate. The canal narrowed as they approached Maya's chosen spot, a natural choke point where the roots jutted into the water like jagged teeth. Here, the python would have little room to maneuver. Maya crouched behind a root, whispering instructions. "You stay here, right at the bend. When I make the noise, I want you ready. Strike hard, fast, and don't hesitate. If you falter, it's over." Daniel gripped his knife until his knuckles went white. "And you? What happens to you?" "I'll be fine," she said, though her eyes betrayed a glimmer of concern. "Just follow the plan. We survived together." A low ripple passed along the water, then another. The python was moving, silent and deliberate, the telltale mass of its body cutting through the canal like a living river. Maya tapped Daniel's shoulder. "Here it comes. Ready?" He nodded, trembling, muscles coiled with fear. Maya stepped into the open slightly, shouting and banging a piece of driftwood against the roots. "Hey, over here!" The python's head shot up, eyes locking on her. It lashed its tongue, tasting the air, then surged toward her with terrifying speed. Daniel's stomach twisted. He wanted to run, wanted to scream, but Maya's signal cut through his panic. "Now!" He lunged, knife poised, plunging it into the python's thick body as it passed the choke point. The snake shrieked, a low, guttural hiss that vibrated in the air and mud around them. Coils tightened reflexively, and Daniel's chest brushed the crushing embrace he knew all too well. Maya fired her rifle, the crack of the shot echoing through the swamp. The python recoiled slightly, thrashing violently against the banks. Daniel struggled to keep his footing as the ground shifted beneath the snake's writhing mass. "Keep going. Don't let it escape," Maya shouted. Daniel drove the knife deeper, using his body weight to press against the python. Blood slicked the mud, the iron scent thick and choking. The snake's head whipped violently, striking the mud near his feet. "It's strong," he panted, muscles screaming. "Too strong. Focus on its coils. Wherever you can grab, stab." Maya barked. She ducked low, lashing a handheld flare toward the python's head, sparks and smoke forcing it back slightly. Daniel's vision blurred, sweat and blood mixing, but he struck again and again, every strike driven by sheer desperation. The python hissed and convulsed, body jerking, coiling tighter, then loosening in reaction to the assault. Maya fired a second round. The report rang out, disorienting the creature further. Daniel felt the rhythm of the fight settle in his bones. Fear became focus. Every strike, every shove, every desperate motion became a calculation. He pressed the knife into a sensitive section under the head and held with all his strength. The python shrieked, twisting violently in pain. A final surge of adrenaline gave Daniel the edge. He dug the knife into the snake's thick muscle with every ounce of his remaining energy. The python's convulsions slowed. Its tail lashed weakly. And then, finally, it collapsed in the shallow mud, body quivering, defeated. Daniel fell to his knees, chest heaving, knife slipping from his trembling hands. Blood and mud streaked his face. He let out a shaky laugh, a mix of relief and exhaustion. Maya dropped to her knees beside him, rifle still raised until the creature stopped moving entirely. Then she exhaled slowly. "You did good," she said softly, her voice almost unrecognizable without the commanding bark. "You didn't freeze. You fought." Daniel shook his head, barely able to speak. I can't believe it. It's dead." "Yes," Maya said. She helped him sit back against a root, scanning the canal one last time to be sure. "Dead. But don't get cocky. These things, they're survivors. There's always more, somewhere out there." Daniel let out a long, shuddering breath, tears of exhaustion stinging his eyes. I thought I was done. I thought I wouldn't make it." Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but steady. "You made it. You stayed alive. That counts more than you know." He closed his eyes, letting the reality of survival sink in. The swamp was still around them, dark and indifferent, but for the first time, he felt hope. "You saved me," he said quietly. "No, Maya Directive. You saved yourself. I just showed you where to aim." For the first time, Daniel really looked at her, sweat-streaked, mud-stained, eyes sharp and fearless, and felt the depth of her knowledge and courage. Without her, he wouldn't have lasted. The swamp remained silent, save for the distant croak of a bullfrog. But Daniel knew, in a way he hadn't before, that survival here wasn't about luck. It was about respect, instinct, and knowing when to fight. And he had learned all three the hard way. The damp night air pressed against Daniel's lungs as he staggered beside Maya along the trail. His body was slick with mud, sweat, and the sticky residue of the python's blood. Every step made his ribs ache as though the coils were still squeezing him from within. Yet, somehow he was alive. "I can't believe that thing is gone," Daniel muttered, voice ragged. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, leaving streaks of blood across his cheek. "Don't get comfortable," Maya replied, scanning the shadows with her flashlight. Her tone was flat but urgent. "Swamp doesn't like easy victories. That python may be dead, but this place? It's full of surprises." Daniel swallowed hard, the words sinking like a stone. "Surprises like what?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. A low gurgle echoed through the trees ahead, a sound of water rushing over mud and roots, subtle but unmistakable. Daniel tensed, scanning the darkness. "What was that?" he asked, panic creeping back into his voice. Maya's jaw tightened. Could be nothing, or it could be a big gator. Either way, stay close, don't make sudden moves. Daniel's stomach lurched. "A gator? Seriously?" "Yes, seriously. Florida's swamps don't forgive mistakes," she said, eyes narrowing as she moved ahead carefully. "We stick to the trail. Keep your weight low, your steps light, and your eyes sharp." He followed, each footfall painful, each breath shallow. For the first time since the python, he realized just how much he had relied on sheer adrenaline and fear alone. Now, with a new threat lurking unseen, fear alone wasn't enough. The trail opened into a small clearing. Moonlight filtered through the mangrove canopy, casting long shadows over a stagnant pool of water. Daniel's eyes fell on it automatically, and his stomach flipped. "I don't like this," he said. His voice was low. "It's too quiet." Maya crouched, scanning the edges of the water with her flashlight. Quiet is worse than noise. Quiet means something's watching, waiting. Daniel swallowed. "Are you saying there's something in there?" Maya's lips pressed together. "I'm saying it wouldn't be the swamp if there wasn't." She gestured toward a narrow boardwalk barely visible in the moonlight. We go across that. It'll take us around the pool, straight back to the main trail. Daniel nodded reluctantly. His legs shook as he stepped forward. The wood groaned under his weight, wet and slick with moss. Each step felt like a gamble. Slow, Maya warned. Don't slip. Halfway across, a splash erupted from the pool. Daniel froze, heart hammering. Something massive moved beneath the surface, water roiling. Maya raised her rifle without hesitation, flashlight cutting through the night. Gator. Big one. Stay calm, move steady. Daniel's knees buckled. Calm? I'm not calm. Pretend you are, she snapped. Just focus on your steps. Don't look down. Daniel's vision darted between the trembling wood and the dark water below. Then it surged upward, a massive snout, nostrils flaring, eyes glinting with cold calculation. Daniel nearly screamed. Step, Maya ordered, and he obeyed, heart in his throat. The gator slid beneath the boardwalk, following silently. It was assessing, patient, its body almost invisible under the dark water. Daniel's hand shook on the knife, the last vestige of his python fight clutched tightly. I'm going to die, he whispered, voice cracking. No, Maya said sharply, standing beside him, rifle steady. Not today. Keep moving. He took a trembling step, then another. The wood groaned, threatening to give way under the combined weight of fear and mud. They reached the far side of the pool. The gator's snout dipped back into the water, disappearing. Daniel exhaled shakily, his body trembling uncontrollably. That was too close, he muttered. Maya didn't answer. She simply gestured for him to follow, eyes scanning constantly. You're learning something tonight, she said finally. Fear is a tool. Panic is poison. Use one, survive. Let the other control you, and it's over. Daniel swallowed, letting the words sink in. I think I understand. Good, she said, nodding. But understanding doesn't matter if you don't act. The trail wound deeper into the swamp. Shadows stretched like living fingers over the ground. Every rustle, every gurgle, every whisper of water set Daniel's nerves jangling. He realized that adrenaline alone wasn't enough to keep him alive. Strategy, observation, and sheer will were now necessary. Why are you helping me? He asked quietly, as they moved along a narrow boardwalk over shallow water. I'm just some tourist. You've got your work, your life. Maya's eyes never left the shadows ahead. Because someone needs to. Because you survived long enough to learn the swamp isn't just water and mud. It's life and death. You'll pass it on someday. Maybe you'll be the one helping someone else. Daniel nodded slowly, swallowing hard. You're really something. I can't imagine how many people don't make it out here. Maya's lips quirked slightly, the first hint of a smile. Too many. But you're still breathing. That counts for something. Suddenly, a shriek echoed from the water nearby, a jagged, alien sound that made Daniel jump. Something massive surged against the edge of the trail, splashing mud and debris. Down, Maya shouted, shoving him to the ground. Daniel hit the mud, knife slipping from his hand. The boardwalk quivered beneath the weight of whatever lurked in the water. For a tense, suspended moment, they didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound of heavy, wet scraping filled the clearing. Whatever it is, Maya whispered, teeth clenched, it's testing us. Just like the python, waiting for a mistake. Daniel's stomach nodded. Another python? Maya shook her head. No, something else. Could be a gator, could be a raccoon, could be something bigger. Doesn't matter. We stay calm, we stay quiet, we survive. The water stilled. Nothing moved. Daniel exhaled shakily, lungs burning. I don't know if I can do this. You can, Maya said firmly. I promise. One step at a time. One move at a time. You're alive because you fought. You're still alive because you're listening. He nodded, letting her words anchor him. Together, they moved slowly forward, careful not to disturb the water, careful not to give the swamp any excuse to strike. Every rustle, every shadow, every ripple became a lesson in survival. Daniel realized that night that surviving the swamp wasn't about killing the threats. It was about respect, vigilance, and trust. And for the first time, He trusted Maya completely. The main trail lay ahead, faintly visible in the moonlight, a lifeline out of the tangled wilderness. But the swamp still loomed around them, dark, endless, and full of hidden predators. And Daniel knew, whatever came next, they wouldn't just run. They would survive. The swamp smelled of wet earth, rot, and iron. Daniel's muscles ached, his ribs throbbed, and mud caked every inch of his body. Yet he moved forward, driven by sheer survival instinct and the tacit guidance of Maya at his side. The night was heavy, still, but the silence itself felt like a trap. "You sure about this spot?" Daniel asked, his voice rasping. His fingers tightened around his knife, every tendon screaming in protest. Maya crouched low behind a fallen mangrove trunk, flashlight beam cutting the darkness. "Positive. Narrow channel, shallow banks, roots on both sides. Once it's in, it won't have room to coil or strike effectively. We make it come to us. We don't chase it, it comes to the trap." Daniel swallowed. "And you're sure it'll take the bait?" Maya smirked faintly, though her eyes were sharp and calculating. "It's predictable. Injured, hungry, angry, it'll come. It wants the easy kill. That's all we give it." Daniel hesitated, glancing toward the dark water that rippled faintly in the moonlight. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm ready for this." "You don't get ready," Maya said, voice low but firm. "You either do it or you die. Pick one." They moved carefully through the mangrove roots, mud sucking at their boots. The channel lay ahead, a natural funnel bordered by twisted roots that jutted from the bank like the jaws of some enormous beast. Maya knelt, gesturing for Daniel to follow. "Here," she whispered. "You stay at the far side. Knife ready. Keep low, keep quiet. I'll lure it in." Daniel's stomach churned. "You always do this alone?" "Always," Maya said, eyes narrowing toward the water. "Until now, maybe." He nodded, muscles coiled with tension. Fear clawed at his chest, but he forced it down. He had survived this swamp once. He could survive it again. A faint ripple moved across the water. Daniel's pulse spiked. He glanced at Maya. "It's coming," she said, teeth clenched. "Steady. Don't move." The python's massive head appeared first, tongue flicking, tasting the night air. Its black eyes locked onto Maya. "Over here," she shouted, slamming a piece of driftwood against the roots. The sound echoed sharply, cutting through the oppressive silence. The snake surged forward, massive coils cutting through the shallow water. Daniel's chest tightened as he saw it move. Muscular, sleek, and impossibly strong. "Now!" Maya hissed. Daniel lunged, knife poised. He slashed into the python's side, the blade sinking deep into thick muscle. The snake shrieked, a guttural, violent hiss that reverberated through the channel. Coils lashed wildly, mud and water spraying in all directions. Maya fired her rifle into the opposite side, a bright flash and sharp crack that made the python recoil momentarily. Daniel pressed the knife in again, driving it deeper, keeping pace with the snake's violent thrashes. "You're doing it!" Maya shouted over the roar of movement. "Keep going. Don't hesitate." The python struck for Daniel, jaws snapping inches from his face. He dove sideways, knife still embedded in its side, and scrambled for leverage. Pain shot through his ribs, a fiery reminder of the previous attacks. But adrenaline, sharpened by fear, carried him forward. "Push it toward the roots." Maya yelled. She jabbed the flare toward the python's head. Sparks flew. The snake recoiled, thrashing wildly, momentarily disoriented. Daniel seized the opportunity. He drove the knife deep under the jaw, twisting. The python shrieked and slammed its body against the roots. Mud exploded around them as it tried to coil, but the narrow channel constrained it. "It's working!" Maya shouted. "Don't stop now." Daniel's arms ached, muscles burning, but he pressed every ounce of strength into the knife. The snake's thrashes slowed, then became jerky, uncoordinated. Blood slicked the mud, mingling with water in a crimson swirl. Suddenly, the python lashed violently toward Maya. She ducked behind a root, rifle snapping twice. Daniel panicked, lunging to intercept. The snake's massive head swung toward him, jaws snapping. He drove the knife upward, stabbing at the soft underside. The snake screamed, convulsing violently. Maya grabbed his shoulder, pulling him aside. "Stay with me. Focus. You got this." Daniel's chest burned, lungs gasping, but he obeyed. He twisted the knife, sinking it deeper, feeling the snake weaken beneath his hands. It thrashed less violently, coiled tighter but slower. "You're almost done," Maya shouted. Daniel drove the knife again, slamming it into the thick muscle just behind the head. The python's massive body quivered, then slowed. Its head thrashed weakly, then finally collapsed into the shallow mud with a wet, final hiss. Daniel sank to his knees, chest heaving, knife slipping from his bloodied fingers. Mud and sweat ran down his face. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Maya approached slowly, rifle still raised until she confirmed the python's immobility. Then she lowered it, letting out a long breath. "You did it," she said softly, voice almost incredulous. "It's dead. Finally." Daniel stared at the massive, still body, disbelief and exhaustion mixing in his chest. I can't believe it," he rasped. We actually did it." Maya crouched beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You did most of it," she said firmly. "I just pointed you in the right direction. You stayed alive, you stayed focused, and you fought. That counts for more than you know." Daniel let out a shuddering laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "I never thought I'd see another sunrise, or survive a swamp." Maya's lips quirked faintly. "You're not out of it yet. The swamp doesn't forgive overconfidence. But right now, you've earned a moment to breathe." He swallowed, chest heaving, looking at her with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." Maya shook her head. "You could. You just didn't know it yet." They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the swamp's subtle sounds, the distant drip of water, the croak of a bullfrog, the rustle of nocturnal creatures. The danger was far from gone, but for the first time that night, Daniel felt a fragile thread of hope. Maya finally stood, brushing mud from her hands. "We get back to the truck. Slowly, carefully. Don't rush." Daniel nodded, chest still burning, ribs aching, muscles screaming, but a spark of resolve had ignited. I can do that." Maya's eyes softened slightly. "I know you can. You've already survived more than most people ever will." They moved together through the swamp, careful with every step, alert to every shadow and sound. The python was dead, but the swamp was alive, full of unseen dangers. And yet, Daniel felt something he hadn't in hours: control, however fleeting. The night air bit at his skin, but the fire in his chest, the fire of survival, of defiance, burned brighter. He was still alive, and he would remain alive. The first pale light of dawn filtered through the dense mangrove canopy, washing the swamp in silver and gold. Mud clung to Daniel's boots, sweat and blood crusted on his skin, and his ribs still throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. But the swamp was quiet now. The python gone, the immediate danger finally over. Maya moved ahead, scanning the trail with practiced eyes, her rifle slung casually over her shoulder. She paused occasionally, crouching, checking for signs of movement in the reeds or water. Daniel followed, slower than her, but steady, gripping the knife loosely in his hand, a habit that had saved him more than once. "Truck's not far," Maya said, her voice low but steady. "We'll be out in less than an hour if nothing jumps us." Daniel exhaled, letting the tension drain from his shoulders just a little. "I never thought I'd make it this far. After that python." His voice broke off, swallowed by exhaustion. Maya glanced at him, a small smirk tugging at her lips. "You did. You kept your head. You kept moving. That's what mattered." He shook his head, disbelief still thick in his chest. "I couldn't have done it without you." Maya's eyes softened. "You could have. You just didn't know it yet. You had the strength all along. I just pointed it out when you needed a guide." They followed the trail as it wound through thick roots and mangrove trunks. The swamp seemed to breathe around them, quiet now, but alive, aware. Birds began to call. A faint wind stirred the reeds, and somewhere in the distance, the croak of a bullfrog echoed like a metronome marking time. Daniel's stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten in hours. He rubbed at his ribs absently, feeling the bruises darken under his skin. I can't believe how much that thing weighed, he said, voice still husky. It was massive, bigger than anything I've ever seen. Maya nodded. That's why you have to respect the swamp. That python wasn't the only danger. Every step, every ripple, every shadow, you survive because you respect what's around you. Daniel swallowed, absorbing the lesson he had learned the hard way. I understand now. I really do. His voice trailed off, and he shook his head. I just hope I can ever forget the rest. Maya glanced at him sharply. You won't forget it. Not entirely. But that's okay. It makes you smarter, stronger. It keeps you alive if you ever come back. A low rustle drew both their attention to the edge of the trail. Daniel tensed instinctively, reaching for his knife. Maya raised a finger, eyes narrowing, and the flashlight beam swept over the brush. It was nothing, just a raccoon, small and curious, emerging from the reeds before disappearing again. Daniel exhaled shakily, the adrenaline lingering even in the relative safety of daylight. See, Maya said almost kindly, not every shadow is death, but always be ready. Daniel nodded. I think I've learned that the hard way. They continued in silence, each step slower now, deliberate, careful. The swamp seemed to shrink around them as the main trail came into view. The distant hum of traffic hinted at civilization, a world far removed from the nightmare they had survived. Finally, the trail opened into a small clearing. There it was, Maya's truck, mud-splattered and waiting. Daniel's legs quivered as he staggered toward it, relief and exhaustion warring in his chest. Maya clapped a hand on his shoulder. Almost there. You did good, Daniel. Survived the swamp. Survived the night. He sank into the driver's seat as she handed him a bottle of water. The cool liquid burned, slightly going down his throat, but it felt like salvation. I can't thank you enough, he said, voice thick with emotion. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. Maya shrugged, settling into the passenger seat. You would have found a way. Maybe slower, maybe messier, maybe with a few more bruises, but you'd have done it. Daniel shook his head, tears prickling his eyes. I don't know if I believe that. Not after. He gestured vaguely toward the swamp, still visible in the morning light. Maya's expression softened. Believe it or not, you survived because you fought. You stayed calm under pressure. You trusted yourself. That's more than most people can say after one night in these waters. He laughed softly, bitter and relieved at once. I feel like I've aged 10 years. Probably more like 20, she said dryly, a hint of humor in her tone. But hey, you're alive. That counts. The engine hummed to life, and the truck rumbled down the muddy trail. Daniel looked out the window, eyes tracing the mangrove maze they had navigated, the swamp alive and indifferent. I keep thinking about the python, he said quietly. It felt like it wanted to kill me personally, like it knew I was the target. Maya glanced at him, expression solemn. They don't think like we do. They react, they survive. What you felt wasn't personal. It was instinct, pure and simple. But that fear you felt, that's real. That's why you're alive. That's why you'll remember. Daniel nodded slowly, staring at the passing shadows. I'll never forget. No, Maya agreed. And you shouldn't. But you will carry it differently now. Not just fear, knowledge, respect, strength. The swamp began to thin, roads and power lines coming into view. Civilization crept back into the world like a distant promise. Daniel exhaled, letting the tension slip from his shoulders, though the memory of the night clung to him like a second skin. Maya glanced at him. You okay? I think so, he said. His voice was quiet but steady. Still sore, still shaken, but alive. That's what matters. Good, she said, starting the truck onto the main road. And if you ever think about coming back here, she smiled faintly, but the edge in her eyes remained. Remember, you're not just a tourist anymore. You're someone who survived the Florida swamp. And that's not something many people can say. Daniel let out a long, shuddering laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "I'll try to remember that." "Good," Maya said. She kept her eyes on the road, but a faint smile softened her features. "Now get ready to tell the story. You earned the right to tell it." The truck rumbled steadily along the road, leaving the mangroves and mud behind. Daniel leaned back, exhausted, letting the morning light warm his face. The swamp was still there, alive and endless, but he had survived. He had faced something impossible, something monstrous, and had lived. He glanced at Maya, her profile bathed in sunlight, rifle resting casually in her lap, eyes alert even in the calm. He felt gratitude, awe, and a profound respect for her knowledge and courage. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought I'd see the outside again. Not like this. Not after everything." "You did," Maya replied, voice calm and sure. "And now you have a choice. Carry the fear or carry the strength. The swamp gave you both. Use one, survive. Use the other, remember." Daniel nodded slowly, letting the words settle. Strength, survival, respect. Lessons learned the hard way. The swamp would haunt him forever, but now it also shaped him, tempered him. And for the first time, he believed he could walk out of the swamp and truly live.